Bassil, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us here in Astro, Malaysia. We're having this conversation in the build up to the Malaysia Palestine game that's taking place on Monday night, Malaysia time. I just wanted to get, before we talk about the football, because it still feels very odd to be having a conversation on football in such a difficult, trying time. And I want to just get started by asking you, Bassil, how exactly are you holding up at the minute, just, balancing everything that's going on right now?
Yeah, well, I think it's difficult. On a personal perspective, you're always thankful that your situation is better than others. But I think it's difficult for a lot of people. I think it's difficult for humanity in general, right? If you're
Mm,
a person that uh, hates to see people suffering, hates to see children dying,
yeah,
then what's happening in Gaza will affect you. And I think it's difficult for anyone to kind of look at the images every day and see,
mhm,
massacre after massacre after massacre that's completely senseless. It's just really hard to swallow, to process. So yeah, I think Palestinian people are very resilient.
mm,
Obviously, this conflict has been going on for 8 decades, not just
yeah,
2 years. So as a result, we've, I think, found coping mechanisms
mm,
to get on with our lives, to continue living. And I think the national team is a perfect example of that. In the midst of this genocide, they went and did things they'd never done before. They had never
yeah,
gotten out of a group stage at an Asian Cup. They When they did that, they never made it to the third round of Asian World Cup qualifying. They didn't. They went and they did that. We nearly made it to round four, and I think if they were in round four, we would be talking about them potentially making a World Cup debut as well.
mm,
So yeah, kind of a difficult question to answer, but overall, I'm doing well considering the circumstances.
yeah. I mean, to be absolutely fair, Basil, even in the build up, when I was thinking of how exactly do I even prepare for this conversation, because I don't exactly know where do you start, how do you process, how do you speak about these things, even from a football point of view, right? In an environment like this, football often feels like a secondary thing. But at the same time, football has got the capacity to be so much more than just a game on the pitch. And I wanted to get your thought. What exactly does the Palestinian national team mean to its people, especially in the context of the genocide that's happening in Gaza right now?
Uh, well, to state the obvious, football is by far the most popular sport in Palestine. It's weaved into the cultural fabric. People watch it every weekend. They watch all the leagues from all around the world. They've got an encyclopedic knowledge of the players, of the teams. So it's a big part of how we like to spend our downtime. The team itself is extremely important because you have to consider that FIFA only recognized Palestine as a national team in 1998.
Mm,
And now there has been a national team in one shape or another for 70 years leading up to that point. But petitions to join FIFA were always turned down. When the Palestine Football Association was created in 1928, um, it was done so with the vision that that Palestine national team would be a national team for all communities in the country, and that was actually one of FIFA's stipulations, was that it needed to be that way.
mm,
Um, to kind of make a long story short, it didn't quite work out that way, and there was a Zionist takeover of the entity that denied Palestinians a chance to play in the leagues they organized, in the national team that competed in World Cup qualifying for the 1934 and 1938 World Cups. So, this team in general is super important because people of my generation, who are in their late 30s and up, will remember that we lived a time without a national team.
mm,
Um, and that's not, we lived a time with a national team that didn't qualify for things. We lived a time where that just didn't exist. So, an Asian Cup would roll around, a World Cup would roll around. You're automatically not in it. And for the qualifiers, you're also not in it. So anytime there's an international break,
yeah,
if you're twiddling your thumbs, you might have a good Palestinian player, and there have been good Palestinian players in the past, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the early 90s, but those guys never got to play for a national team. So I
yeah,
think it has an added importance because for a certain generation, we know what it's like not to have a national team. And for the younger generation, when you see Palestine play for those 2 hours, you're just talking about football and their performance on the pitch. You're not saying, oh, well, there's occupation and there's this problem at home. No, you're just focusing on Palestine as a team. And Palestine as a national team, divorced from that context, is actually a very, very good Asian national team, as we've seen in the past couple of years.
I mean, I get how powerful that must be, right? The ability to just, appreciate what the previous generations did not have, but also the ability to just, have a temporary escape from this, literal hell of a life that some of them are going through at the minute whenever they get to watch the Palestinian national team. But I also want to get your thoughts on, is it also in a way, when you talk about a world in which the Palestinian identity is constantly being questioned, there is a constant attempt to try and erase it as well. And in a world like that, the existence of the national team and the fact that it travels around the world playing these matches is sort of like a message that we are here, that we exist, and we will continue to endure.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It was fashionable 30, 40 years ago to just completely deny that there was such a thing called Palestine or Palestinians, that it was an identity like any other identity in the world. Obviously, that's couldn't be further from the truth, right? Palestine is a country that has been mentioned in historical texts for thousands of years. There's a 4,000-year history where you can go back and see the word Palestine being used, and as an identity. And as a society, it was one of the most advanced, if not the most advanced, Arab society in the turn of the 20th century, and living standards were comparable to living standards elsewhere in the Mediterranean and parts of Europe. So yeah, it is powerful to be able to take the stage, fly your flag, play your anthem, and select 11 men who hail from all parts of historic Palestine. And that's Jerusalem, Gaza, the West Bank, inside the Green Line, what is considered "quote unquote" Israel proper, the diaspora as well, and have them represent your nation and the Palestinian story by extension is obviously very powerful.
I want to talk a little bit about the World Cup qualifiers. I mean, you alluded to it, just how powerful it is for these players to take to the field and represent the national team. And earlier, in one of your answers earlier also, you sort of alluded to the journey that Palestine have been going through in recent times. I remember watching that game, Bassil. I mean, couldn't be a bigger heartbreak, because I think there was a large group of fans around the globe that were absolutely rooting for the ultimate dream story, right? The Palestinian dream story. And it all came down to that game against Oman, where you guys were so close, so close to making it to the fourth round of the World Cup qualifiers, but it was dashed in injury time. I mean, talk to us about that journey and how heartbreaking it must have been.
Well, it's been a couple months now. It's been 3 months now, so I think I've had time to process as a fan, as a Palestinian individual, and to kind of appreciate what the team did, which is, to play 16 World Cup qualifiers, 8 of them which is supposed to be on your home patch, but you can't play at home, so no home field advantage, and we know how really important that is in the Asian context to racking up points and to qualifying for tournaments. The fact that they made history, they made the third round of World Cup qualifying without that advantage is huge. So you have to appreciate that. The fact that they made it further than they ever had done before in making it to the third round to be amongst the final 18 teams in Asia is huge. If you look at their performances within the games themselves, I mean, 2 draws against South Korea, it just proves that it wasn't a fluke, right? It's the only team in this World Cup cycle that went undefeated against South Korea, which is the team that always qualifies for the World Cup from Asia. They've been to every single one since 1982. So we beat Iraq for the first time. So you can just go through all the accomplishments and feel proud and feel that, hey, we can build on this. And I think the players and the coaches feel like, hey, we can build on this and we can have a success at the Arab Cup at the end of the year, next year's Asian Cup, and for the next cycle after that. Now, as far as the heartbreak is concerned, I don't know if how familiar the viewers are with the controversy. Look, it was a penalty given in the last 30 seconds. And I've seen that clip so many times. It wasn't a penalty. It's obviously Mohsen Ghassani dived. There's no contact there. And I think if you kind of just break it down frame by frame, Maoud Bunyadifar, the Iranian referee who was in charge, is really far away from the action. And I just remember watching that game, and I was watching the flight of the ball. And if you kind of go back and look at the referee is also looking at the flight of the ball, as he should. And the fact that the linesman had a really good view of it, and he didn't wave his flag or anything, that's a controversy. And the fact that we were told, watching the video stream, that there's a VAR check in process, and the fact that this is a really crucial call that will affect the destiny of these two teams. Either Oman is going to the fourth round or Palestine is going to the fourth round. What does it cost you to take a minute or 2 minutes to go to the monitor and just make sure that your call is correct? So, there's a lot of question marks there. And I just think that any neutral person will look at that and say, hey, that is to put it kindly, a very, very dodgy call. But, that's football. And I think the players have processed what has happened to them a little bit better than the fans. I'm still processing. But I think also if you look at that game, we also have to accept that we shouldn't have been in that situation. We had a numerical advantage, I believe, for the final 20 minutes or so of that game. We had chances as well to make it 2-0, and we didn't take them. And in general, last 5 minutes, we were, I think, a little bit too conservative in giving Oman the ball. Now, all that being said, if that call is actually the correct call, then how Palestine managed the game and playing defensively and giving Oman the ball and all that stuff is vindicated, because you ended up winning the game. So it does come down to a refereeing error. But that's football, and the way I see it is that every single great footballing nation has a story like this. And I don't think we quite had a story like this, but now we have, our hand of God moment, our, Pico 1982, if you're a fan of Algeria. Every single big footballing nation has a story like this, and now we have ours. And quite frankly, for the longest time, the only thing people in Asia were talking about was this game and this goal. So, it's football at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a powerful one because of, not just the way the game unfolded, not just the way the drama unfolded in the game, but also the consequences of it, right? Because of where the World Cup was going to be held next year, the dream of potentially seeing Palestine on that stage, the bigger, the larger than life significance of that World Cup run, right? So I really, really understand the frustrations, and it was being echoed, as you say, it all across Asia. Malaysian fans were talking about it, Southeast Asian fans were talking about it, right? It was such a huge, huge moment. But I want to get into the composition of the team as well, because this is such a fascinating team, Bassil. It's made up of players that that are born and bred within the Palestinian territory. You've also got foreign-based Palestinian footballers. You've got the diaspora footballers, and they've all merged and combined into this incredible team and I'm curious, how do they exactly manage the weight of representing a nation that's combating a problem that is so much bigger than football at the minute?
Yeah, I think what helps this particular generation of players is that they've really grown up together, and they've grown up together in similar circumstances. So there are players from the diaspora. And if you kind of look at the history of Palestinian football, diaspora players have, I think, played an outsized role when Palestine's level locally and when the local league wasn't being played. There was a more of a dependence of going out there and finding players who were eligible for Palestine, who played football week in, week out, because of consequence of the Second Intifada in the, for most of the 2000s, we weren't playing football at home. You're not playing football at home. It means your most talented footballers that you are developing aren't actually improving because they don't play week in, week out. This particular group, if you go back to Palestine's 3-0 win over Hong Kong at the Asian Cup, which got them to the knockout round for the first time, 9 out of the 11 players on the pitch, or no, excuse me, 10 out of the 11 players on the pitch who were in the starting 11 were born in Palestine. 9 out of the 11 were either products of the West Bank League or the Gaza League. All the substitutes on the bench, same thing. They used the 5 substitutes. 4 out of the 5 were products of the local league. All 5 were born in Palestine. So, yeah, there are a couple of key players there, and we can name them. You know, there's a lovely center back named Milad Termanini, born in Sweden. Wissam Abu Ali joined the team in 2024, born in Denmark. And yeah, it goes on. There's Agustin Mansour, who was born in Argentina. But I think what has helped this team develop is they've come in and they've put 1, 2, 3 players in positions where they might have a weakness in locally, or maybe they don't have depth. And that's really raised the level because you're building on a very solid base of players you've developed.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that because your question is, how do they deal with the weight of what they're representing? And because the base are people that were born in Palestine, they have that connection. You know, it's part of their daily life. So when you come in from the diaspora, and you know many of the diaspora players, they speak Arabic, they know they're connected to the culture, but they're not connected to the day-to-day. They see something on TV, but they don't know what that means on a day-to-day basis. But now they have, you know, a friend, more than a friend, a brother in the national team who lives that, and now they can understand more about their country through their brothers on the national team. And that's super, super important, because when you do bring in a player that might be eligible because he has a grandparent from Palestine, but he himself is not at all culturally Palestinian, he does not speak the language, it also imparts the importance of playing for this country onto them. And you know, if you look at someone like Agustin Mansour, who was bought in June, doesn't speak any Arabic, doesn't speak any English. It's really, really hard to communicate with him, but he's a fantastic player. Even he is slowly starting to understand what it means to play for Palestine, because he is an individual that is part of a group. And if he wants to succeed, he has to integrate into the group. So I think this national team is very, very powerful because, you know, even if you're a Palestinian that's living in the diaspora, maybe you've never been back home, you can start to feel and understand what being Palestinian means through following this team, and if you're a player, through playing for this team.
That's such a fascinating process, right? Especially for those who were born outside, who grew up with stories of the situation. But obviously, it's completely different when you were born or developed in the Gaza League or the West Bank League. As you pointed out, having the day-to-day connection, it's a completely different experience altogether. And you know, having the marriage of those two identities within the national team. It's such a fascinating, for the lack of a better word, it's such a fascinating composition within the national team. And within this composition, Bassil, there's obviously a player that's very familiar to Malaysian football fans, Odai Karup. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but he obviously played for Kelantan in the Malaysian Super League last season, and the fans of Kelantan took to a real liking of him. Malaysian football fans genuinely supported him. Every time there was a game involving him playing, you would see Palestinian flags on the field. But help us understand the team a bit better. So, you know, taking Odai Karup out of the equation, who are some of the biggest inspirational characters and leaders in the current team?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, you mentioned Odai Karup. Odai Karup is kind of like the unsung hero of this campaign. Because if you kind of look at where he was trajectory-wise in 2023 when qualifying started, yeah, you know, he was a guy, he was a body, one of the midfielders you could use. He didn't really start all the time, and he'd been around the program for a while. He played at all the youth levels, you know, a lifer in the West Bank League. I think I even mentioned this at the start of qualifying. I said, hey, you know, maybe we look to get a little bit younger in the position. Maybe he doesn't get called up for the Asian Cup. Oh boy, did he prove me wrong. And like, so happy that I was proved wrong. A guy that has improved so much, got his chance to play abroad in Malaysia, later got his chance to play abroad in Libya, went from strength to strength. And if you kind of look at what he did, assisting super important goals, last minute goals against Kuwait, For example, could have been a very, very important point had we gotten the result against Oman. Just a complete fighter. And I think if fans are familiar with Odey Kharoub, that fighting spirit is what you have in a lot of the players. Now, you asked about who are some of the best players. I would say that there's a debate right now as to who's the best player in this team. And so you've got a camp that will say Odey Dabbagh, another Odey, is the best player. And Odey Dabbagh is, he's our treasure because he's born in Jerusalem and he was, made his debut in the league at 16 years old, and he scored a bunch of goals in Palestine. And then he represented the youth teams. And the only time Palestine qualified for anything at the youth level was the 2018 Under-23 Asian Cup. And he completely lit it up over there. And he did everything right. He went abroad when he was just 20 years old. He went to Kuwait. It didn't go right for him. He stayed in Kuwait until he became the top scorer and a champion in Kuwait. And then he went to Europe, and he did well in Portugal. He won the Scottish Cup this past year with Aberdeen. And you're really proud because this is who you developed. Now, the highest profile player, and probably the name that's on everybody's lips right now, is another forward, is Wissam Abu Ali. Yeah. Wissam Abu Ali has an amazing trajectory, but he sort of came out of nowhere because he had suffered a heart attack on the pitch in 2021, came back a couple of weeks after coming back, broke all his ribs, spent another season on the sidelines, but then something just switched in 2023, and he just kept scoring goals galore in the Danish second division, goes to the Swedish top division, scores 10 goals in 16 games, so that was half a season, and then the winter of 2024 transfers to Al Ahly, who are in the middle of their season in Egypt, and with just half a season becomes the top scorer in Egypt, also wins the African Champions League, and then played at this past year's Club World Cup, where he scored a hat-trick against Porto. And on the back of that, he's one of MLS's, the American League's designated players. That means, he's making really, really big money. And basically his team sees him as, they have an opportunity to bring in a player such as Messi or Suarez, these profiles that are playing in Miami. They chose to spend that designated player spot on him. And since playing for the national team, since making his debut in June 2024, he's also scored a bunch of important goals for the national team. Probably the most important one was the first goal against Iraq in that March comeback where they won 2-1 with 2 goals in the final 5 minutes of the game. I think there's a camp that will still say, Odey's the all-time leading goal scorer, and he's our guy. And then other people will say, oh, yeah, but look what Wissam did at club level. Also, he scored these important goals in qualifying. So I would say probably the two strikers are the best. Odey Dabbagh, unfortunately, is injured. He's not with the team. And I think you can make an argument also for some other players as well. And that's really exciting from my standpoint because I've been covering this team for 2 decades now. And we just have never had a team as talented and as deep as we do now. To be even talking about players that are, doing big things for big clubs like Al Ahly or playing in Europe is really, really crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible, really. I mean, with his trajectory, I've watched some of his games before. He's such a true force to be reckoned with up front. The way he plays, the way he carries himself is a real juggernaut of a player. There's a real bunch of exciting players within the Palestinian national team. And to be absolutely honest, Bassil, I mean, it's also a real honor for Malaysia to host the national team over here. I mean, they were supposed to come by a couple of years ago for the Merdeka tournament, but obviously they couldn't make that trip at that point in time. It was a bit too complex, the situation. It's such a pleasure to have them down here. They are playing in Johor. They'll be playing at the Sultan Ibrahim Stadium, which is an absolute state-of-the-art stadium as well. And Malaysia and Palestine, I mean, there's always been a strong sense of solidarity between both people. If you were to go to any Malaysian stadiums, regardless of whether it's the national team stadiums or whether it's the stadiums of club football, you would see the supporters all the time being vocally against the genocide that's happening in Gaza at the minute. But I also want to ask you this, just before we wrap up this conversation. There's been a huge outpouring of love, support, and solidarity from the football community, particularly in Asia and even Southeast Asia. But what can we do more? What can we do better as a football community to help combat the atrocities that are happening right now?
It's a good question. I think in Asia, fans have done a lot, but it's kind of like the nature of just the footballing hierarchy. In that, if it happens in Europe, it's more appreciated or it gets more covered. But we shouldn't forget all the support that we've gotten in all across Asia. Malaysia, Indonesia, across the Arab world as well. There's been a lot of support from the grassroots, and that's very heartening to see, because when it comes from the grassroots, it means so much more than when a league comes up with a campaign and a hashtag. It's a little bit empty. So we can feel that there is support and solidarity for us. If Malaysian fans are looking for a concrete thing that you can do to help beyond, kind of donating to humanitarian issues, if you want to actually help this national team, I would say put pressure on your clubs to sign Palestinian players. I know Adel Haroub came, but we need to see more than just Adel Haroub. And if I could speak specifically, actually, what I would say to any fan of Malaysian football would be put pressure on your club, on the FA. I'm pretty sure foreign goalkeepers aren't allowed in Malaysia, in the Malaysian league.
They are.
100% they are
allowed.
Okay,
yeah.
So here is one thing that should definitely be done, and I think fans should take this to heart. Sign Palestine's national team goalkeeper, Rami Hamadi, because this guy, we talked about some of the best players, and maybe there's a debate as to who's the best striker, but there is no debate as to who's the best goalkeeper in Palestine and who maybe is the best goalkeeper in Palestine's history, and that's Rami Hamadi. You're talking about a guy that is a symbol of the resilience of this team, because October 7th happens, league stops, he doesn't have a club for over a year. He's keeping clean sheets at the Asian Cup and World Cup qualifying. He travels to Seoul. He's man of the match and keeps a clean sheet against Sun and Lee Kang-in and all these big names. He does it again where he's practically man of the match in a 1-1 draw, and he's still without a club. And he got his opportunity to play in the Qatari second division, but the only way he can play is by getting an exemption, and that exemption hasn't for some reason been released for this season now. So he has a club, but he's not playing because he can't be registered. Yeah. So I would say, if you are a fan of Malaysian football, if you want to support Palestine, make it a point to tell your club, hey, let's sign this guy. He's one of the best goalkeepers in Asia. You're talking 58 caps, 28 clean sheets, a GAA of 0.87. It would be a good sign. So I would say, if you want to support, probably the most concrete thing you can do is put pressure on your club to sign this guy, because he's a really good player. And we saw with Adel Haroub how good he was with Kelantan. Why not sign more Palestinian players? Yeah. I think it's a match made in heaven, really, for Palestinian players to play in the Malaysian league.
That's a fantastic point, to be honest, Bassil. Malaysia has already, we've signed a lot of players from the Arab continent. I mean, there's a couple of Jordanian stars playing for Selangor, for example. We've signed players. Habib Haroun from Bahrain is also playing in Malaysia. So I think it's as you pointed out, it's a match made in heaven, really. It should be an absolute no-brainer for Malaysian clubs to try and bring more Palestinian talent and put them on the map through the Malaysian football scene. I look forward to pushing this narrative onto the fans and to see what can come out of it in the coming weeks and months as well. Bassil, thank you so much. Honestly, I could keep having this conversation. There's so much more that I want to talk about. Perhaps we will jump on another conversation down the line. But for now, thank you so much, Bassil, for taking the time to speak with us here in Astro, Malaysia. We look forward to watching the Malaysia versus Palestine game tomorrow. And I look forward to having a conversation with you again down the line, when hopefully things are in a much better space as well at that point.
Yeah, hopefully we can talk again soon, and good luck for tomorrow's match. Looking forward to it. I've got fond memories of Palestine versus Malaysia. It's always a good match. Remember all the way back to qualifying for the 2002 World Cup. One of Palestine's first wins was 1-0 against Malaysia, and then they played a barn burner 4-3. A game that Malaysia won. So hopefully we get to see something like that tomorrow, and may the best team win.